doing business in Africa. You can't afford to be without Africa Investor.
So I'm really just going to jump straight into this, and Marc-Andre, I think this is an open question for all. I don't think in the last 24 months we've seen such a united voice, such a clinical focus on investors making calls and being prescriptive to MDBs about the types of institutional, operational and governance changes we feel could catalyze private capital at scale. And I know that you've all touched on this. I'll be really interested to get your views about what your organization is doing in that particular area, what the highlights are, what the motivations were, and what the expectations are in terms of how you are seeking to have a different strategic relationship with the MDBs in the context of that reform.
Thank you very much, Hubert. I'm very happy to be here. I just want to say an honor to be on this panel. So what was done recently by many times it was said to the private sector, to the institutional investors, well, we don't know what you want. What would it take for you to invest in some frontier markets? And you're never there. All of the criticism you've heard. So we really pushed on that and said, and we came out, whether through SMI, ILN, GISD, all of the groups where the private sector are and the institutional investors, and said there are 5 things we want. And amongst those 5, the most important one are we need de-risking instruments that are at scale from either the MDBs or from development finance institutions, from FinDev Canada or DFC in the US or others. The second thing, we need a project development platform that we, the institutional investors, can access. At the moment, there's a lot of project development going on in forms of technical assistance to the countries, to the governments, to make sure that they have the investable environment. There's a lot of it, there's some of it at the World Bank, but there's none that is accessible to the institutional investors. And this is a big market failure where we need project development in a wide sense of the term, being accessible to institutional investors. Just to give you an idea, at the World Bank, there are, 18,000 people who work there. There are 17 people. 18,000 work there, 17 people total are focused on project development. This, if you want a reform of the MDBs without having a big Bretton Woods meeting again, just put more money on the project development, and that would be of great help. The third thing that is very important is the access. The World Bank and the other MDBs have a lot of information about the markets, and that's a great way to help us institutional investors to de-risk ourselves. So the GEMS database that exists at the World Bank should be accessible to all of us. There should be way more transparency about what has worked, what has not worked, what has been the return, and all of that. And that would help us actually better understanding the risk. You know, when you don't understand the risk, you tend to overestimate the risk, underestimate the opportunities. And you know, the gentleman that was there before was in his report said, you know, Africa faces pushback from investors due to a perceived lack of bankable projects. I've asked the gentleman, is it perceived or it's real? We believe it's real. So if the perception that we have, the belief that we have is wrong, well, let's work together. We all recognize the growth of the African continent. We all recognize there are opportunities there. The problem is we have no experience in this market for all of the reasons, good and bad. But let's assume that we all start there. So we need help as institutional investors to better understand. We're willing to do our part, but we need partners. And there are many ways to de-risk ourselves, not only the MDBs. I'm, you know, sometimes more hopeful with other sources of de-risking, like local partners that we co-invest with, governments that we can actually create platform with, young entrepreneurs with technology that we can actually work with. All of these things, and some family offices that could be very helpful. So there are many ways of de-risking ourselves. Yes, with the MDBs, there are some steps, but there are other ways to do it as well, and we need to work on all of the legs of the stool at the same time.
Doing business in Africa, you can't afford to be without Africa Investor.